The beeping of the equipment was the first thing I heard as I snapped out of my foggy slumber. The ceiling of the hospital room blurred before my eyes, the white squares of tile seeming alien and hostile. My chest whimpered dully, not a sharp pain, but rather a reminder of what had happened. A heart attack. At 67, that's no joke anymore. I tried to move, and my body responded reluctantly as if it didn't belong to me. The catheter in my arm made it hard to move, but I still reached the nightstand where my phone was. The display blinked, showing 4 missed calls and 2 messages. The first was from my daughter, Vivian. "We flew out, taking all your money, bye." I blinked, rereading the message again. A familiar bitterness spilled inside, but there was no surprise. My relationship with Vivian had long ago turned into a cold war with no winners. The second message was from her husband, Theodore. Photo. He and Vivian are on board an airplane, smiling at the camera. Theodore gives a thumbs up and Vivian clings to him like a schoolgirl running away from class. The caption to the photo was short. "Thanks for the sponsorship, old man. Enjoy your hospital food while we drink margaritas on the beach." My heart rate sped up and the machine next to me beeped louder. I had to take a few deep breaths to calm down. At my age, anger is an unacceptable luxury. It could cost lives. I opened the banking app. A PIN code, another PIN code. $0 and 0 cents. Primary account, savings account, even retirement, same thing. $187,000. Gone. All of my life savings. My heart ached again, harder this time. A nurse came into the room, attracted by the changes in the monitor. "Mr. Haddington, you mustn't worry," she said sternly, checking the drip. "Dr. Mayfield will be here shortly. How are you feeling?" "Like a man having a heart attack," I replied hoarsely. She adjusted the pillow and walked out, leaving me alone with my thoughts and the beeping of the heart monitor. Vivian, my only daughter. Once upon a time, when Eleanor was still alive, we were almost a normal family. Vivian loved to sit on my lap while I read her bedtime stories. In high school, she would come to me with math and physics questions. I helped her study for her final exams. And then Eleanor got sick. Cancer was eating my wife from the inside out, fast and relentless. Vivian was 22 that year, fresh out of college. We buried Eleanor on a rainy October afternoon, and we buried something with her, our ability to talk to each other. I drifted off to work, into endless projects and blueprints. Vivian took a job at an insurance company and moved out a month after the funeral. Our meetings became infrequent and tense. It was like we were blaming each other for not being able to save Eleanor. And then Theodore showed up, a tall, confident man with a perfect smile and empty eyes. He worked as an inspector in the food industry and, in his words, made sure Americans didn't poison themselves. From the first time I met him, I sensed falseness in him, but Vivian was charmed. They were married after 6 months of dating. After the wedding, our relationship with our daughter became even colder. Theodore always found a way to throw a quip at me, and Vivian only nodded in agreement. At family dinners twice a year, Thanksgiving and Christmas, Theodore liked to talk about his non-existent accomplishments and plans to get rich, and I sat silent, not wanting to spoil my daughter's holiday. 3 years ago, I retired. The construction company I'd worked for almost 30 years had thrown a small party. Vivian didn't show up. She had a migraine. Theodore sent a text saying, "Old man, rest up and don't get bored." That was the first time I thought they were more interested in my money than I was. I turned my gaze to the window. Behind the glass, I could see the treetops and a patch of sky. Kirtland is a small town where everyone knows each other, or thought they did. No one in this town knew that 20 years ago, when I'd first moved up to lead engineer, I'd been pulled into an illegal scheme. The company I worked for was getting big government contracts for municipal construction projects. The owner of the firm, Ray Thornton, had connections with certain people who helped win the contracts. In exchange, We turned a blind eye to the quality of certain materials and allowed us to use cheap substitutes instead of the ones specified in the project. I found out about it by accident when I discovered discrepancies in the reports. Ray called me into his office and told me bluntly that I was either part of the system or looking for a new job. He also hinted that the people he deals with don't like it when someone knows too much. I had a mortgage, a young daughter, and a wife who was just starting her career at a local school. I agreed to keep quiet and do what was required. That's how I met Arthur Pratt, a man who solved problems. Any kind of problem. I had never been directly involved in crime, but I knew enough people who had. Pratt introduced me to several investors, as he called them. Among them was Jorge Mendez, a Mexican who laundered money through construction projects in the United States. When Ray died of a heart attack 8 years ago and the company was bought by a large holding company, all those connections became a thing of the past. I became an ordinary engineer doing my job with integrity. At least, that's what I thought. The phone vibrated in my hand. Unknown number. Wilbur Haddington, I answered. Will? It's Gwyneth. Gwyneth Barrow. Oh my God, I just found out you were in the hospital. What's wrong? Gwyneth was a co-worker of mine from my days with Ray. She was a bookkeeper and knew as much about the company's shady dealings as I did. We were never close friends, but we shared a past, shared secrets. After the company was sold, she started her own accounting firm. My heart, I answered briefly. It's okay. You'll be discharged soon. I'll visit you. What room are you in? 312. But do not... I'll be there in an hour, she interrupted, and passed out. I leaned back against the pillows. My mind was spinning with scraps of thoughts. Vivian and Theodore flying to Mexico with my money. Jorge Mendez and his connections in Cancun and Playa del Carmen. Arthur Pratt, who, as far as I knew, was still solving problems in Kirtland. Dr. Mayfield appeared in the chamber with a clipboard in his hands. Mr. Haddington, it's good to see you awake. How are you feeling? I've been better, I replied. When will I be discharged? Not so fast, he checked the readings. You had a serious attack. If it hadn't been for your neighbor who called an ambulance, it could have been much worse. We need to run some more tests, find some more meds. I think you'll be with us for 3 or 4 days. I don't have health insurance, I admitted. Only Medicare, and that's basic. Don't worry about that now. The doctor made a note on his clipboard. Are there any relatives that need to be notified? I shook my head. No, no one. When the doctor left, I picked up the phone again. Vivian wasn't answering her cell phone. I opened the app to track bank transactions. The last withdrawal was yesterday at 18:30, almost immediately after I'd been taken away in the ambulance. $170,000 transferred to an account at another bank. An account in the name of Theodore Nabel. The remaining $17,000 withdrawn in cash from an ATM. They've been waiting for this moment, waiting for me to be helpless so they could take everything I had. The photo from the plane was geolocated. Cleveland International Airport. Judging by the departure time, they had taken a morning flight. I opened the flight map. There were only 3 international flights out of Cleveland at this time: Toronto, London, and Cancun. Cancun, Mexico, Jorge Mendez's territory. For the first time in years, I felt something inside that I had long thought was dead waking up. Anger, but not blind rage, but cold, calculating rage. I knew what to do. I knew who to call. The door of the room opened and Gwyneth walked in. She hadn't changed much in the years we hadn't seen each other. The same reddish hair in a neat bun, the same attentive eyes behind her glasses. Only there were more wrinkles and gray in her hair. Will. She walked over to the bed and took my hand gently. You look terrible. Hello to you too, I tried to smile. What's wrong? You've always taken care of your health. Stress, age, I shrugged. The usual. Gwyneth sat down on the edge of the bed. And the real reason? I hesitated for a moment. Gwyneth was one of the few people who knew about my past, and the only one I could trust now. Vivian and her husband stole all my money and flew to Mexico, I said, looking her straight in the eye. Every last dime. Gwyneth didn't look shocked. She just nodded as if confirming her thoughts. What are you going to do? Are you still in touch with Arthur Pratt? Her eyes widened slightly. Will, you can't be serious, can you? That was 20 years ago. We've all been out of that business for a long time. I'm more serious than ever. My voice was calm. They took everything, Gwyneth, everything I had. I can't let them. She looked at me for a long moment, then sighed. Arthur is still in business. And yes, I do his bookkeeping sometimes. But Will, you do realize what you're getting into, don't you? You're 67. You just had a heart attack. That's why I have nothing to lose. I squeezed her hand. Help me, Gwyneth. I need Arthur's contact. And I need something else. What's that? Do you remember Jorge Mendez? She turned pale. That Mexican guy? Of course I remember him. He was a scary man. I need to know how to get in touch with him, and if he still has business in Cancun. Gwyneth shook her head. You're crazy, Will. It's not just dangerous, it's suicide. Maybe. I looked out the window, where the sun was starting to set. But I'm not going to lie here and let them laugh at me while they spend the money I've been saving all my life. The monitor beeped faster again, reflecting my excitement. Gwyneth looked at the screen worriedly. Okay, she finally said. I'll help you, but only because I know that if I say no, you'll find a way to do it anyway, and you'll probably get into more trouble. Thank you. I felt something like relief for the first time all day. Don't thank me. She stood up. I'll contact Arthur. You get some rest and try not to die in the next few days, okay? When Gwyneth left, I looked again at the picture Theodore had sent me. Their smug smiles. They thought they'd won, that the old man would die in the hospital and they would enjoy his money on the beaches of Mexico. They didn't know who they were messing with, but soon they will. I'll take care of it. Hospital discharge proved to be a real ordeal. Dr. Mayfield frowned as he reviewed the results of the latest tests, clearly not pleased with my insistence on leaving the hospital. Mr. Haddington, I strongly advise against discharge at this time. Your condition has stabilized, but the risk of another attack is still high. I understand the risks, doctor, I said, my voice sounding more confident than I felt. But I have urgent matters that cannot be delayed. What business could be more important than your health? Mayfield took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose tiredly. At your age, a heart attack is a big wake-up call. Family circumstances, I answered briefly, not wanting to go into details. Eventually, the doctor gave in, making me sign a paper saying that I refused further treatment under his care and accepted full responsibility for any consequences. He wrote prescriptions for a bunch of medications and set a date for a follow-up visit in a week, even though we both realized I wasn't going to make it. Gwyneth was waiting in the hallway, leafing through some glossy magazine. When she saw me, she put it down and stood up. Were you able to convince Mayfield? More like wearing him down with my stubbornness. I tried to smile, but it was more of a grimace. Shall we go to my place? I was silent on the way home, staring out the window at the familiar streets of Kirtland. The fall sun softly illuminated the neat houses with manicured lawns, typical American suburbia, where everyone smiled at each other and pretended life was wonderful. Gwyneth parked in front of my house, a small one-story structure with a blue roof and a white fence. Eleanor had once insisted on painting the fence white, like a real American house. I didn't repaint it after she died, although the paint had long since peeled off and the fence needed repair. I talked to Arthur, Gwyneth said, turning off the engine. He'll be at your place in an hour. Thank you. Will, are you sure you want to go this way? Shouldn't you go to the police? I shook my head. What am I going to tell them? That my daughter and son-in-law stole my money? It's my daughter, Gwyneth. I gave her access to the accounts in case something happened to me. Legally, they haven't broken anything. But they took advantage of your fortune. Prove it, I grinned bitterly. No, the police won't help. I have my own methods. Everything at home was the same as it had been before I was hospitalized. On the kitchen table, the cup of coffee I hadn't had time to wash before the ambulance took me away. Next to it is an open newspaper with a half-solved crossword puzzle. In the living room, the TV remote lay on my favorite chair. While Gwyneth brewed fresh coffee, I went into the bedroom and opened the top drawer of the dresser. Under a stack of neatly folded shirts lay an old notebook in a worn leather binding. I hadn't opened it in years, but it was always there, a reminder that everyone had a dark past. The little book was filled with names, phone numbers, dates, and amounts, a legacy of my work with Ray Thornton. Most of the contacts were probably long out of date, but some might still be relevant. I flipped through the yellowed pages until I found what I was looking for: Jorge Mendez. Across from his name was a note: San Miguel, fish business. It was a coded way to remember that Jorge had something to do with cocaine shipments through fishing boats in the port of San Miguel de Cozumel. The phone number written next to the name had probably been out of service for a long time, but I knew how to find Jorge. If he was still alive, of course. The ringing of the doorbell interrupted my musings. I tucked the book back into the dresser and went to open it. Arthur Pratt stood on the doorstep, a stocky man with a thick gray beard and piercing blue eyes. He had lost a good deal of weight in 20 years, but his gaze was the same, sharp and attentive. The look of a man who instantly assessed the situation and calculated the risks. Haddington. He nodded instead of greeting. You look lousy. Come in, Arthur. I stepped back, letting him inside. Gwyneth was already pouring coffee into cups in the living room. Arthur gave her an appraising look and chuckled. The years have taken their toll on you, Barrow. You're still a chatterbox, she retorted, setting the cup down in front of him. We sat down at the kitchen table. I outlined the situation briefly, without emotion. Arthur listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally. So your daughter and her hubby flew to Mexico with your money, he summarized when I was done. And you want me to help you find them? Not just find them. I sipped my coffee. I want to teach them a lesson. Arthur looked at me carefully. Are you sure you want to do that, Will? This is your daughter after all. She stopped being my daughter the moment she decided to steal from me while I was unconscious in the hospital. My voice sounded cold and detached, like I was talking about a stranger. But I don't want to hurt her physically. I just want them to realize who they're dealing with. Arthur scratched his beard thoughtfully. I can find them. I have connections at Mexican airports. If they flew into Cancun, we'll know where they're staying. I need more. I put the notebook in front of him, open at the page with Jorge Mendez's name on it. I need contact with him. Arthur's eyebrows went up. Mendez? Are you serious? Damn it, Will. You're playing with fire. This guy's not the kind of guy you can joke around with. I have a special relationship with him. I finished my coffee. In 2000, I helped him stay out of serious trouble with the feds. He owes me. Gwyneth looked at me in surprise. You never told me that. Some things are best kept to yourself, I shrugged. So, Arthur, can you find me Jorge? He looked at me for a moment, then nodded. I can try, but it will cost money, and I can't guarantee results. How much? 5,000 to start. 5 more if I find him. I don't have that kind of money, I shook my head. Vivian and Theodore took everything. I do, Gwyneth said suddenly. I can lend it to you, Will. I looked at her in surprise. Why would you do that? She looked away. Because I know what it's like to be betrayed by the people closest to you. We agreed that Arthur would start the search immediately. He promised to contact me as soon as he knew anything about Vivian and Theodore's whereabouts. He also undertook to look for Jorge Mendez's contacts through his channels. When Arthur left, Gwyneth and I were alone. She silently collected cups from the table, and I stared out the window, absorbed in my own thoughts. "Tell me about Vivian," she finally asked, sitting down across from me. "When did it all go wrong?" I sighed, gathering my thoughts. Memories of Vivian were a mixed bag of feelings, sorrow, disappointment, but somewhere deep down, a father's love still lingered. After Eleanor died, we were both broken, I began quietly. Vivian blamed me for not insisting on more aggressive treatment. I blamed myself for the same. We couldn't be around each other without hurting each other, so we just stopped communicating. I told Gwyneth how the rare meetings with my daughter had become a formality, how Theodore's arrival had only made things worse, how I'd noticed his influence on Vivian. She used to at least call on my birthday, but even that tradition had fallen away after marriage. Theodore always looked at me like I was a bag of money, I continued. One day, he asked me directly how much I planned to leave Vivian as an inheritance. I told him I hadn't decided yet. After that, he became especially cold. "And Vivian?" Gwyneth asked. "Was she interested in your money too?" I wondered. Vivian had never asked about money directly, but I had seen her attitude toward me change over the years, how her smile warmed when I gave her expensive gifts, and how quickly it faded when the gift was more modest than she expected. "I don't know," I answered honestly. Maybe Theodore had influenced her. Or maybe she'd always been like that. I just didn't want to see it. Gwyneth covered my hand with hers. "Are you sure you want to take revenge on your own daughter?" "I want mine back," I said firmly. "And yes, I want them both to get what they deserve, especially Theodore. I'm sure he was the one who initiated the theft. And if you're wrong—" I shook my head. "I know my daughter. She has always been impulsive, but not calculating. Waiting for my heart attack to steal the money is cold-blooded calculation. It's Theodore's handwriting." We sat in the kitchen until late afternoon, reminiscing about the past and making plans for the near future. Gwyneth offered to stay the night. She was afraid to leave me alone after I was discharged from the hospital. I didn't argue, though I usually didn't like it when someone disturbed my privacy. The next morning, Arthur called with news. "Found your lovebirds," he said without preamble. "They were staying at the Grand Vivas in Playa del Carmen. It's a swanky 5-star hotel right on the coast. Apparently, they got a suite overlooking the ocean." I clutched the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. "Thanks, Arthur. What about Jorge?" "It's complicated." I could hear the wariness in his voice. "Mendez is a big shot now. He's legalized most of his business, owns a chain of hotels and restaurants in tourist areas. It's almost impossible to reach him directly. But I have a contact for one of his assistants. I told him that Wilbur Haddington wants to contact his boss for old time's sake. Now we wait for a response." "How long will that take?" "A day, maybe 2. Depends on whether Jorge remembers you and wants to do business with you." I thanked Arthur and hung up. Gwyneth, who was making breakfast, looked at me questioningly. "They're in Playa del Carmen," I said. "They're living the high life in a fancy hotel." "With your money," she added, setting a plate of scrambled eggs in front of me. "My money," I echoed. After breakfast, Gwyneth and I started planning our trip to Mexico. I insisted that she not accompany me. It was my own business, and I didn't want to involve her any more than necessary. Gwyneth argued for a long time, but finally agreed to stay in Kirtland on the condition that I keep in touch regularly. "Promise me you won't do anything irreparable," she demanded. "I promise I'll only do what those two deserve," I replied evasively. In the afternoon came a message from Arthur. "Mendez remembers you. Wants to talk. Check your email." In my inbox, I found a letter from an unfamiliar address. Inside was only an encrypted file with no password. I was about to call Arthur back when another message arrived. "The password is the name of the fish you helped release from the net in 2000. I smiled. Jorge always liked to speak in metaphors. The fish was Jorge himself, and the net was the federal investigation I'd helped him evade by warning him of an impending raid. The password had to be Marlin, Jorge's nickname back then. I entered the password, and the file opened. Inside was a short message in Spanish and a link to a secure messenger. I installed the app on my phone and entered the username and password provided in the email. A chat room with a single contact named Old Friend was already waiting for me. Wilbur, long time, the message appeared as soon as I logged in. Hello, Jorge, I replied. Glad you still remember me. I never forget those who once saved my hide. What can I do for an old friend? I briefly described the situation without going into emotion. Just the facts. My daughter and son-in-law stole the money. They're in Playa del Carmen now. I want to teach them a lesson. What kind of lesson do you want to teach? Jorge asked after a pause. I don't want them to be physically harmed. I chose my words carefully. But I want them to experience real fear. To realize that you can't steal from your own father with impunity. And what do you suggest? I'm flying to Cancun in 3 days. I need your help to organize for them a special reception. Jorge didn't answer for several minutes. I was beginning to think he'd given up when a new message appeared. Fly in. My men will meet you at the airport. I've just got a few guys who can play the part of Mexican cops. We'll discuss the details when we meet. I exhaled a sigh of relief. Thanks, Jorge. I owe you one. No, amigo. I'm still the one who owes you, and I always pay my debts. The chat closed and the app deleted from the phone automatically. Jorge's security system was always top-notch. I called the airline and booked a ticket to Cancun on the next flight. While I was talking to the operator, the doorbell rang. Gwyneth opened it and I heard Arthur's familiar voice. Did you get the contact? He asked as he entered the living room. Yes, Jorge agreed to help. I handed him the envelope of money. Your fee, as agreed. Arthur weighed the envelope in his hand and nodded. When are you leaving? In 3 days. I can arrange an escort for you, he offered. I have a couple of reliable guys in Cancun. I shook my head. Jorge has his own people, and they'll meet me. Besides, it's a personal matter. Arthur shrugged. Whatever you say. But be careful. Mexico is not the safest place for a 67-year-old gringo with a bad heart. I'll be careful, I assured him. When Arthur left, Gwyneth looked at me questioningly. Are you really going to go to Mexico alone? Yes. I sat back in my chair, feeling suddenly tired. This is my battle, Gwyneth. I have to do this on my own. And then what? She sat down on the arm of my chair. When it's over, what will you do? I wondered. The question hadn't occurred to me yet. All I could think about the last few days was revenge. I don't know, I answered honestly. Maybe I'll sell the house and move somewhere else. Start a new life. At your age? Why not? I smiled sadly. What's keeping me here? A house full of memories of the woman I lost 15 years ago? A daughter who hates me and steals from me? A job I left long ago? Gwyneth looked at me for a long moment, then said quietly, You can always count on my help, Will, whatever you decide. That night I couldn't sleep for a long time. As I lay in the dark, I thought about Vivian, about how she had changed over the years. Once she had been a sweet girl who brought me drawings from school and proudly showed me her A's in her diary. Then a withdrawn teenager, arguing with me over every little thing. Then a young woman who looked at me with cold aloofness at my mother's funeral. Now she was a thief who'd stolen from her own father. I was sure it was all Theodore's fault. He had encouraged her to do it, manipulated her, fueled her resentment of me. Maybe she didn't even know the truth. Maybe Theodore had convinced her that I would leave her nothing, and that this was the only way to get what was owed to her. But even if that was the case, it didn't justify her actions. She made her choice, and now she would have to face the consequences. With that thought, I finally fell asleep, determined to fly to Mexico and carry out my plan. A plan that would turn Vivian and Theodore's carefree vacation into a nightmare. The hot, humid air of Cancun hit me as soon as I stepped out of the cool airport lounge. The sky was a dazzling blue, without a single cloud, and the sun was scorching, making me wish I had brought a hat. After Kirtland in the fall, this tropical heat seemed almost unbearable. A swarthy man in a white shirt and dark glasses stood at the terminal exit, among the cab drivers and greeters. He held a sign that read Haddington. I headed toward him, rolling a small suitcase behind me. "Senor Haddington?" he asked in a strong accent as I came closer. "Yes, that's me. My name is Ramon. I am from Senor Mendez. Please follow me." Ramon picked up my suitcase and led me to a black SUV with tinted windows in the parking lot. It was cool inside, thanks to the air conditioner running at full blast, and I was relieved to sink into the back seat. "Senor Mendez is waiting for you," Ramon said, starting the car. "The drive will take about an hour." We left the airport and joined the traffic heading toward Playa del Carmen. I looked out the window at the palm trees and hotel signs advertising paradise vacations and unforgettable experiences. I wondered if Vivian and Theodore's vacation would turn out to be as unforgettable. An hour later, Ramon turned off the highway onto a small road leading to the coast. After another 10 minutes, we arrived at the gate of a luxurious villa surrounded by a high fence. The guard at the gate inspected the car carefully before pressing a button on the remote control. The gate opened silently. "Welcome to Casa del Mar," Ramon said, parking the car at the entrance to the 2-story mansion with white walls and a red tile roof. Jorge Mendez himself met us at the door. In 20 years he had not changed much, the same trim figure, dark skin, and shrewd brown eyes. Only his black, slicked-back hair had gray at the temples, and there were wrinkles around his eyes. "Wilbur." He spread his arms in a gesture of welcome. "How many years, how many winters? You haven't changed a bit." "You look good too, Jorge." I shook his outstretched hand. "You lie and don't blush," he laughed. "We've both gotten older, but that's okay, right? The main thing is that we're still alive. Come in, don't stand in the heat." Inside, the villa was even more impressive than outside. The spacious living room with panoramic windows overlooked the ocean. Modern furniture was combined with traditional Mexican decor elements, colorful rugs, ceramic vases, and paintings by local artists. "Something to drink?" Jorge asked, pointing to the bar. "Tequila, whiskey, wine?" "Water, if you can," I replied. "You have to be careful with alcohol after a heart attack." "Heart attack?" Jorge frowned. "You didn't mention it." "It happened before my daughter and son-in-law stole my money." I sank into a comfortable chair. "Apparently, they were waiting for the right moment." Jorge shook his head. "Family. They can hurt more than enemies." He poured me water from the carafe and tequila for himself. "To the reunion of old friends." We clinked glasses and I took a sip of cold water. I was tired from the flight, but I was determined. "You said your men are watching my daughter and her husband?" "Yes." Jorge set the glass aside and picked up a clipboard from the table. "Here, take a look." He handed me the tablet, on the screen of which were pictures of Vivian and Theodore. In one picture they were sunbathing by the pool. In another they were having dinner at a restaurant, and in a third they were walking along the beach. They looked happy and carefree, as if they had done nothing wrong. "When were these photos taken?" I asked, feeling anger boiling up inside me. "This morning," Jorge answered. "They're staying at the Grand Vivas, just like you said. Deluxe room, all-inclusive. From the restaurant and shopping receipts, they're not stingy. Your daughter bought a $3,000 necklace yesterday." I gritted my teeth, remembering how I'd been saving that money for years, saving from every paycheck, saving for everything to ensure a secure old age, and now these two were spending it left and right like they'd won the lottery. "What do you want to do, Wilbur?" Jorge looked at me carefully. "I can just give your money back. One word and my guys will take everything they bought, plus the rest of the cash." It's that simple. I shook my head. No, I want more than that. I want them to realize who they're dealing with. I want them to remember this lesson for the rest of their lives. And how do you see that? You were talking about people who could play the role of policemen. Jorge smiled. Oh, I see. Do you want to scare them into arrest? That could be arranged. I have 2 guys, ex-cops, working for me now. They can put on their uniforms, come to the hotel, and pick up your daughter and son-in-law for questioning. Bring them to a safe place where you can talk to them. Exactly, I nodded. And I want it to look as realistic as possible. I want them to be really scared. Oh, don't worry, Jorge grinned. My guys know what they're doing. They'll make your daughter and son-in-law shit their pants with fear. When do you want to do it? Tomorrow, I said firmly. The sooner the better. Good. Jorge stood up. Tonight you rest, recover from the flight. Tomorrow morning we'll get everything ready. I didn't sleep well that night, despite the comfortable bed and the sound of the ocean outside the window. I had nightmares of Vivian laughing at me while I was dying in the hospital. I woke up early at first light and stood under the cold shower for a long time trying to regain consciousness. Jorge was already waiting for me in the living room, talking on the phone in rapid Spanish. When he saw me, he ended the conversation and smiled. Good morning. How did you sleep? Not so good, I admitted, accepting a cup of coffee from the maid. Nervous? Jorge nodded understandingly. It's normal. But don't worry, everything will go smoothly. My men are already in position. Your daughter and son-in-law have just ordered breakfast for the room. They're leaving in 2 hours for a tour of Tulum, an ancient Mayan city. We'll intercept them on the way. He showed me a map on his clipboard. There, on this road, they'll be stopped by a police car. The officers will say that they have received information about tourists carrying drugs, and they need to check their documents and luggage. Then they will find the drugs. It will actually be regular flour, but it will look like cocaine. And then the fun would begin. I listened to his plan, feeling strangely calm. Not so long ago, the thought of doing that to my own daughter would have seemed sacrilegious, but now I felt no remorse whatsoever. At 10 o'clock in the morning, we left the villa in 2 cars. I drove with Jorge in his black SUV, and ahead of us was an old police car with flashing lights and 2 men in Mexican police uniforms. This is Miguel and Antonio, Jorge introduced them. Both used to work for the Cancun police, so they know all the procedures. They speak English, but with a strong accent, which will only add to the realism. We arrived at the abandoned house earlier than planned. It was a 1-story structure with peeling paint and boarded-up windows. There was an overgrown garden around the house, and a narrow path, barely visible in the tall grass, led to the entrance. It's all set up inside, Jorge said as we entered the house. There are 2 rooms. In one, we will put your daughter and son-in-law. In the next one you'll be in, you can watch them through the one-way mirror. When you decide they're scared enough, you can go in and talk to them. We took our positions and waited. Jorge was getting messages from his men monitoring Vivian and Theodore's movements. Finally, the message came that they had boarded a tour van and left the hotel. Let's get started, Jorge commanded, and Miguel and Antonio got into the police car. Jorge and I stayed in the house, watching the operation through the camera on the tablet. The police car stopped the van on a deserted stretch of road. Miguel approached the driver, showed his ID, and said something. Then he opened the van door and pointed to Vivian and Theodore. I saw my daughter and son-in-law look at each other in bewilderment, then reluctantly get off the bus. Miguel said something to them, pointing to his car. Theodore began to argue, waving his arms. Antonio moved closer, putting his hand on his holster. After that, Theodore visibly subdued. They were put into a police car and driven to an abandoned house. I moved away from the window so I wouldn't be visible when they pulled up and took up a position behind the one-way mirror. The door to the interrogation room swung open and they were pushed inside. Vivian looked terrified. Her blonde hair disheveled, her eyes wide with fear. Theodore seemed more annoyed than scared. He kept demanding a lawyer and threatening to complain to the American embassy. "Sit down," Miguel shouted, pointing to the chairs. "Hands on the table." They complied. Antonio threw a bag of white powder on the table. "Do you know what this is?" "I have no idea," Theodore snarled. "It's not ours." "Of course it's not yours," Antonio grinned sarcastically. "We just found it in your bag by accident. Half a kilo of cocaine. In Mexico, you get 10 to 25 years for that." Theodore's face turned pale. "It's a mistake. We're tourists. We never—" "Shut up." Miguel slammed his palm on the table. "We know who you are. We know you stole money from an old man in the States and came here to spend it. And now the drugs—" Vivian gasped and turned to her husband. "How do they know about the money?" Theodore gave her a warning look. "They're bluffing. Don't say anything." "Bluffing?" Antonio laughed. $187,000. Stolen from Wilbur Haddington, who was in the hospital with a heart attack. That's a bluff? Now Vivian turned pale. She looked at her husband again, but with terror in her eyes. "Who are you?" she whispered. "How do you know all this?" Miguel and Antonio played out the interrogation scene as if it were a play-by-play. They frightened them with prison, mentioned Mexican cartels, and insisted on their cooperation. Vivian began to cry, and Theodore looked like he was about to faint from fear. When Jorge, who was standing next to me behind the mirror, quietly asked, "Ready?" I nodded. It was time to go on stage. The door opened with a dramatic creak. Vivian and Theodore turned their heads in sync, expecting to see the returning police officers. When they recognized me, their faces changed. Shock, disbelief, fear. "Dad!" Vivian jumped up from her chair but immediately sat back down as if her legs refused to hold her. "Hello, Vivian." I entered the room slowly. "Hello, Theodore." Surprised. What are you doing here?" Vivian whispered. "Isn't it obvious?" I sat down across the table from them. "I've come to take back what's mine." Theodore was the first to come to his senses. "You set all this up? Those fake cops? The arrest? Did you do this?" "Mine and my old friend Jorge's." I smiled as I saw their faces change. "You thought you were dealing with a helpless old man?" "Wrong." "But how?" Vivian looked at me as if seeing me for the first time. You have connections with the Mexican police?" "Not exactly with the police." I leaned back in my chair. "Let's just say I have friends in various circles, friends who remember old debts and are willing to pay them." "This is illegal," Theodore began. "It's kidnapping. I'll complain." "To whom?" I laughed. "To the American embassy? The Mexican police? What are you going to tell them? That you stole money from your father-in-law, came here to spend it, and then got busted with drugs? Trust me, a real Mexican prison is a lot scarier than this place." I told them about my past, about working with Ray Thornton, about the illegal schemes and dark deeds I'd been involved in 20 years ago. With each word, their eyes grew wider and their faces paler. "It can't be," Vivian whispered when I was done. "You've always been so." "Right. Always talking about honesty, about not breaking the law." "That's why I was talking about it." I shrugged. "Because I knew what the opposite would happen. I wanted to protect you from the mistakes I'd made myself. But I guess I didn't succeed." They looked at me with horror and incomprehension. Their perception of me was crumbling before their eyes, and with it their sense of security. They knew now that they were not dealing with a helpless old man, but with a man who had the means and the connections to exact revenge. A man whose dark past had just become their nightmarish present. "Are you thirsty?" I asked, pulling 2 bottles of water from the refrigerator next to me. "It's hot in Mexico. It's easy to get dehydrated." Vivian took the bottle hesitantly, but Theodore refused, crossing his arms stubbornly over his chest. "As you wish," I shrugged and sat down across from them. We have a long conversation ahead of us. What do we have to talk about? Theodore tried to sound confident, but his voice shook. You kidnapped us using some bandits. That's illegal. Are you seriously talking about illegality now? I grinned. After you stole $187,000 from a man in the hospital? I didn't steal. He jutted his chin stubbornly. Vivian had legal access to your accounts. Access I gave her in case I died or became incapacitated. I shifted my gaze to my daughter. Not so she could empty them at the first opportunity. Vivian lowered her eyes. She'd always done that when she felt guilty, ever since she was a child, when I'd caught her in the act of misbehavior. Now, however, it was far from petty. You have no idea of the situation you've put me in, I continued. You've left me destitute. Hospital bills, medication, mortgage, all of it has to be paid for. How do you expect me to do that? You have a pension, Vivian muttered, not looking up. I barely have enough for food and utilities, I countered. And heart medication is expensive, very expensive. There was silence. Theodore fidgeted uneasily in his chair and Vivian looked genuinely ashamed. But I needed more than just temporary remorse. I wanted them to realize the depth of their betrayal. You know, Vivian, I softened my tone deliberately, when your mother was dying, she made me promise to always take care of you. And I tried, even when you became distant after she died, even when you moved away and almost stopped calling, I still saved money for you. Most of that money was going to be your inheritance. Vivian's eyes filled with tears. Then why didn't you ever tell me about it? She whispered. Did you ask? I shook my head. No, of course not. But your husband did, often and persistently. Theodore tensed. What do you mean? Oh, don't pretend you don't understand. I leaned forward. 3 years ago, at my birthday party, you took me aside and asked me directly how much I planned to leave Vivian. Then there was Thanksgiving, when you asked if I wanted to sign the house over to Vivian for safekeeping. And of course, Christmas last year when you offered to be the steward of my finances because, at my age, it could be burdensome. Vivian slowly turned her head toward her husband. You never told me about those conversations. Because they never happened, Theodore replied quickly. Your father makes things up to make us fight. He is? I pulled out my phone and turned on the tape. Theodore's voice filled the room. Look, Will, you're not getting any younger. Wouldn't it make sense to give some of your fortune to Vivian by now? We could invest the money, multiply it. I know some promising projects. I stopped the tape. Vivian looked at her husband with disbelief and growing anger. You tried to swindle money out of him behind my back? Her voice shook. And all the while telling me that my father is a selfish man who thinks only of himself. Theodore started to justify himself. I was doing it for us, Viv. Your father was sitting on a pile of money while we were barely making ends meet. That money was going to come to you sooner or later, who cares when? The difference is that it was his money, Vivian shouted. He earned it himself and he had the right to use it as he pleased. I wanted to make things better for us, Theodore went on the offensive. What did your father do for us? Nothing. He didn't even pay enough for our wedding. I watched them fight in silence. The plan was working. The rift between them was getting worse by the minute. Now I had to add a little more oil to the fire. Speaking of the wedding, I intervened when they paused to catch their breath. Vivian, do you know that Theodore came to see me the week before the ceremony? She stared at me. What? Oh, yes, I nodded. He asked me for $20,000 to promote the business. He said that if I didn't give you the money, you'd postpone the wedding because you didn't want to start your family life in debt. That's a lie. Theodore was indignant, but his face turned traitorously red. I have a record of that too, I said calmly. I recorded all our financial conversations. I had a hunch I might need them someday. Vivian covered her face with her hands. Oh my God, Ted. You told me that the money for our wedding was your savings from the bonus. He doesn't have a bonus. I shook my head. He'd been promoted to chief inspector only 2 years ago, and before that he was barely getting by. I made inquiries. Theodore jumped up from his chair. Enough! You're deliberately lying to break us up. Vivian, can't you see he's manipulating you? Manipulating? I laughed. What have you been doing all these years? Your father never loved you. Your father thinks you're a burden. Your father doesn't want to see us at the holidays, were all your words that Vivian recounted to her friend Lauren, and the latter to her mother, who happens to be my neighbor. Vivian raised her head slowly. There were tears in her eyes, but her gaze was hard. Is it true, Ted? Did you say all that? Theodore was obviously nervous. He looked around as if looking for an escape route. Vivian, it's not that simple. Your father never approved of me, never thought me worthy of you. He looked down on me, humiliated me. When? I raised an eyebrow. Give me one example. All the time. He waved his hands. At every family dinner, you asked me questions about my work, about my plans, like you were testing me. It's called showing interest, I said dryly. Normal behavior for a father-in-law. But you always took it as an interrogation because you had something to hide, like you're gambling. Vivian turned sharply to her husband. What gambling? Theodore turned pale. He's lying. You have a secret online casino account, I interrupted him. You've lost about $30,000 in the last 3 years. I wonder where a food inspector gets that kind of money to gamble. How do you know about the casino? Whispered Theodore, forgetting his denials. I have my sources, I answered evasively. More importantly, where did the money come from, Theodore? Did you steal it from Vivian? Or did you take out loans she doesn't know about? Vivian stood up from her chair, her face contorted with anger. Tell me the truth, Ted. Tell me the truth now. Cornered, Theodore decided to counterattack. And you? You offered to take your father's money. He'll never give it to us anyway. He only promises but does nothing. Didn't you say that? Vivian recoiled as if from a blow. I never suggested stealing. I was talking about asking him to help us with the down payment on the house, nothing more. But you agreed to take the money when I offered. Theodore jabbed his finger at her. Don't act like you're the innocent victim here. I agreed to take the money because you said that it was your father himself who allowed us to take the money for the vacation. Tears were streaming down her face. You said you talked to him when he was conscious in the hospital and he told us not to worry and to take what we needed. Theodore fell silent, realizing that he had trapped himself. I watched the scene with grim satisfaction. It was going even better than I had planned. So it was. I nodded slowly. You lied to Vivian to get her to agree to the theft. And then you convinced her to write that message and send your picture to burn all the bridges. That's clever. Vivian turned to me, her face contorted with pain and shame. Dad, I swear I didn't know. He said you said it was okay. Shut up, Theodore shouted. Don't believe her, old man. She knew everything. She told me that you didn't have long to live and that we could finally enjoy ourselves. It was a blatant lie, and we both knew it. Vivian could be deceitful, selfish, even greedy, but she was never cruel, unlike her husband. Vivian looked at Theodore in disgust. How can you say that? I never, ever wished for my father's death. No? Theodore curled his lips in a wicked grin. Who said life would be easier with the old man gone? Who dreamed of an inheritance? I never said any such thing. She raised her voice. You're twisting my words. I was saying that someday, in the distant future, we might use the inheritance to buy a bigger house. But I never, ever wished my father harm. I decided it was time for the final blow. Do you know, Vivian, what else your husband has been hiding from you? I took an envelope out of my pocket and put it on the table. Take a look. She carefully took the envelope and opened it. Inside were printouts of messages, Dozens of pages of Theodore's correspondence with some woman named Brooke. Very personal correspondence. "What's this?" Vivian whispered, flipping through the pages. "Proof that your husband has been cheating on you for over a year with a waitress from Mike's bar," I shrugged. "I wasn't going to show it to you, but since we're being honest..." Theodore lunged toward the table, trying to grab the papers. "Give it back! It's a forgery! He faked the whole thing!" But Vivian had already read enough. She looked at her husband with such disgust that he stepped back. "I can't wait till we're together forever," she recited. "When we get the old man's money, we'll go away at once where no one will find it." "Are those your words, Ted? Were you planning to leave me by robbing my father?" Theodore looked like a cornered animal. His eyes darted around the room and his hands trembled. "It's not what you think," he began, but stopped himself, realizing the pointlessness of denial. "Yes, Brooke and I had a relationship, but I wasn't going to leave you. It wasn't serious." "Not serious." Vivian threw the papers in his face. "You talked to her about how you were going to spend my father's money. You told her you hated your life with me." "Vivian, please." Theodore took a step toward her, but she backed away. "I can explain everything." "Don't come near me." Her voice shook with rage. "You're disgusting. All this time you've been lying to me, manipulating me, turning me against my own father. And for what? To steal his money and run off with some whore?" Theodore's face suddenly changed. The mask of remorse was gone, replaced by anger. "Fuck both of you," he shouted. "You and your daddy. You think I liked living with you? With your perpetual depression, your whining about how much your father didn't love you. You're the one who pushed him away after Mom died. You ruined your relationship and then complained to me about it for years." Vivian turned pale, but didn't back down. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I did push him away. But I never lied to you, never cheated on you, never planned to steal from you." She turned to me. "Daddy, I'm sorry. I didn't know. I really thought you'd let us take the money." Theodore couldn't take it anymore. "Enough of this circus!" He rushed to the door but found it locked. "Let me out of here. I want a lawyer. I'm an American citizen." I calmly pressed a button on the phone, and a moment later, Miguel and Antonio entered the room. "Is there a problem?" Miguel asked, looking at Theodore. "Our guest wants to leave." I nodded at him. "Please explain to him why this is not a good idea." Miguel and Antonio approached Theodore. Their faces did not bode well. Theodore backed away. "Don't touch me. I haven't done anything." "Nothing," Antonio laughed. "You stole money from a man our boss respects. In our world, they cut off your hands for that." Vivian gasped and Theodore turned even paler. "You can't. It's illegal." "A lot of illegal things happen every day in Mexico," Miguel shrugged. "Tourists go missing and no one ever finds their bodies." It was part of the plan to scare Theodore half to death, but not to physically harm him. However, Theodore unknowingly took the threat seriously. In a panic, he lunged at Miguel, trying to make his way to the door. Miguel didn't even tense up. In one crisp motion, he intercepted Theodore's arm and snapped it behind his back, causing him to scream in pain. "Bad idea, amigo," Miguel said calmly, pinning Theodore to the floor. "A very bad idea." Antonio pulled out the handcuffs and snapped them on Theodore's wrists. "I think this gringo needs time to think about his behavior, alone." They lifted Theodore to his feet. He no longer resisted but gave Vivian a pleading look. "Viv, don't let them. Help me." But Vivian turned away, tears streaming down her face. "Take him away," I commanded, and Miguel and Antonio led Theodore out of the room. When the door closed, Vivian and I were alone. She stood with her arms wrapped around herself, crying quietly. I did not hurry to break the silence. Let her realize everything that had happened. "What will happen now?" she finally asked me. "What will you do to Ted?" "It's nothing," I sighed. "We'll scare him a little longer, and then we'll let him go. But on one condition." What's that? You both give me my money back. Every dime. Vivian nodded. Of course, I'll sell everything I bought here. And that necklace, we'll get it all back. She looked up at me, her eyes full of remorse. Daddy, I'm so sorry to you. I let Ted come between us. I believed everything he said about you. I was such a fool. I took my time comforting her. Years of estrangement and betrayal, however unwitting, couldn't be erased with a single, I'm sorry. Yes, you were a fool, I agreed. And you hurt me. Not just with money, though, that's important too, but with your mistrust, your willingness to believe the worst about me. I know, she lowered her head. There's no excuse for what I did. No, I confirmed, but at least you admit your guilt, unlike your husband. Vivian shuddered at the mention of Theodore. I can't believe he cheated on me, that he planned to leave me and take your money. How could I have been so blind? Love often blinds you, I shrugged. But now you know the truth. What are you going to do next? She looked at me with determination in her eyes. Get a divorce. As soon as I get back to the States, I'll file for divorce. She hesitated. Maybe we could try to work things out, you and me, start over? I stared at her for a long time, remembering the little girl who had once run toward me with her arms open, screaming, Daddy! The girl I had lost so many years ago. But instead of warmth, all I felt was tiredness and emptiness. I don't know, Vivian, I answered honestly. Too much water has passed. Too many resentments have built up. I'm not sure we can just start over. Her face contorted in pain, but she nodded. I understand, but I want to try, if you'll let me. At that moment, the door opened and Jorge walked in. Wilbur, can I talk to you for a minute? I followed him out into the hallway. Your brother-in-law tried to attack Miguel when they were taking him down to the basement, Jorge said. I had to restrain him for a while. Nothing serious, just a couple of bruises, but he's not at his best right now. He's always been an impulsive idiot, I shook my head. What's wrong with him now? He's in the basement, strapped to a chair. Miguel's with him. He's pretty scared, and he's already promised to give all the money back if we just let him go. Okay, I nodded. Let him sit there until morning. He'll think about his behavior. Jorge grinned. What about your daughter? Is she going to the basement too? No, I shook my head. She can stay in one of the rooms upstairs. With supervision, of course. Whatever you say, Jorge shrugged. That's your business, I don't interfere. But I must say, you put on quite a show. I'm impressed. I returned to the room where Vivian was still standing with her arms wrapped around herself. Theodore will spend the night in the basement, I told her, and you will be escorted to a room upstairs. Tomorrow morning we'll decide what to do next. She nodded without arguing. When Antonio came to escort her upstairs, she gave me one last look, a look of remorse and hope. But I didn't know if I could forgive her. I didn't know if I wanted to rebuild our relationship. All I wanted now was to get my money back and forget this unpleasant story. I walked out onto the veranda of the house and took a long look at the starry Mexican sky. Somewhere down in the basement, Theodore was getting his lesson from Jorge's men. Somewhere upstairs, Vivian was mourning her marriage and perhaps her relationship with me. And I was standing in the middle, feeling neither triumph nor satisfaction, only emptiness and fatigue. Tomorrow I had a final decision to make, what to do with these two people who had caused me so much pain. And I didn't know what it would be. The morning was surprisingly cool. The ocean breeze brought freshness, mitigating the usual Mexican heat. I sat on the veranda of Jorge's villa, sipping strong coffee and watching the waves crash against the shore. The night had been restless. Thoughts of Vivian, of Theodore, of what had happened between us, kept me awake. Jorge joined me, silently appearing behind me. How did you sleep, my friend? Honestly, lousy. I set the cup aside. What about our, guests? Your daughter woke up an hour ago. She had breakfast, but she barely touched her food. She's sitting in her room, staring out the window. Her hubby, on the other hand, Jorge grinned. After a night in the basement, he was much more cooperative. Miguel says he'd sign anything to get out of here. I nodded. The plan was working, now I had to make it work. I want to talk to them together, I said. Can you arrange it? Half an hour later, we were gathered in the living room of the villa. Jorge made sure we were not disturbed and left, leaving me alone with Vivian and Theodore. Theodore looked wrinkled and frightened. There was a bruise under his left eye, and his lower lip was split. He sat on the edge of his chair, keeping his eyes down and fidgeting nervously with the edge of his shirt. Vivian, on the other hand, seemed collected and determined, though her reddened eyes showed that she had spent the night in tears. I think you're wondering what's going to happen next, I began without preamble. I have an offer, or rather, 2 options to choose from. They both looked up, waiting for me to continue. The first option is that you pay me back every cent of the money. After that, I'll let you go, without passports and without funds, but alive and well. You get out of Mexico on your own however you can, and from this moment on, we never see each other or communicate again. I renounce all kinship with you, Vivian. You cease to be my daughter. I cease to be your father. Forever. Vivian shuddered but remained silent. Theodore looked at me hopefully. And the second option. You stay here in Mexico. My voice sounded cold and detached. My friend Jorge has many connections and many properties in remote areas of the country. Believe me, no one will ever find you. Theodore turned pale. You can't do this. It's kidnapping. I've already done that, I interrupted him. I can do a lot more. The only question is whether I have the mercy to let you go. Vivian finally spoke. You're bluffing. You're not going to leave us here. You're not that kind of person. I looked her straight in the eye. What kind of man am I, Vivian? You don't seem to know me at all. Otherwise, you wouldn't believe everything your husband said about me. You wouldn't have stolen my money while I was in the hospital. I've already explained, her voice trembled. Ted told me you said it was okay. And you believed it? I shook my head. Believed that I'd let you take all my savings? Not part of it, not a specific amount, but all of it? And you weren't confused by the message you sent. We flew away with all your money. Bye. Does that sound like a thank you to the person who willingly shared it with you? She lowered her eyes. No, of course not. But Ted insisted on that text. He said it would be funny. Funny, I grinned. Yeah, very funny. Especially funny was the photo your husband sent. Remember the caption, Theodore. Thanks for the sponsorship, old man. Enjoy your hospital food while we drink margaritas on the beach. It's hilarious, isn't it? Theodore cringed in his chair. I shouldn't have done that. It was cruel. Yes, it was cruel, I agreed. And stupid, because it was that photo that helped me find you. Geolocation, Theodore. You forgot to turn it off. He turned even paler. I didn't know. Of course you didn't know, I shrugged. You don't know much at all. For instance, you didn't know that I had connections in Mexico, that I could find you anywhere in the country, that I'm not a man who can be ripped off with impunity. I turned to Vivian. And you didn't know either, because you never took any interest in my life. To you, I've always been just a daddy who should give you money and ask no questions. And when I didn't fit that image, you turned your back on me. That's not true, she exclaimed. I loved you. But after Mom died, you distanced yourself from me. You went to work. You hardly spoke to me. Because I was grieving, I answered quietly. I lost the woman I loved more than life. And yes, I dealt with it as best I could, working to the point of exhaustion so I wouldn't have to think about the pain. But I never stopped loving you, Vivian. Never gave up on you. Not until now, she grinned bitterly. Now you're offering me a divorce, a renunciation of kinship. So which one of us turned away first? You turned away when you believed your husband's lies about me, when you agreed to steal my money. When you sent that text message, my voice was firm, and now I'm just processing what's already happened. Theodore suddenly perked up. Look, let's not get heated. We've all made mistakes. I'm the first. I lied to Vivian, turned her against you, offered to take the money. It's my fault, and I'm willing to answer for it. But Vivian had nothing to do with it. She really thought you authorized. Shut up, Ted, Vivian cut him off. Don't try to protect me. I'm a grown woman. I'm responsible for my own actions. Yes, you manipulated me. You lied to me. But I let you do it. I could have asked my father directly. I could have verified what you said. But I didn't because I was comfortable believing you. She turned to me. You're right, Dad. I am guilty in front of you. And if you want to end our relationship, that's your right. I won't blame you. Her sincerity took me by surprise. I expected tears, tantrums, accusations, but not this calm acceptance of responsibility. As for the money, she continued, we'll pay it all back. I have access to our joint account through the app. I can transfer the money right now. Not to my account, I shook my head. Jorge had prepared several dummy accounts. The money will be routed through them to cover our tracks. Vivian nodded. Good. Give me the details and I'll do everything. I handed her a piece of paper with the information Jorge had prepared. Vivian took out her phone and started entering the data. Theodore watched her with growing panic. Viv, wait. Are you really going to give away all the money? What about us? What are we going to live on? On your salary as a food inspector. She cut him off without looking up from the phone. Unless, of course, you get fired for absenteeism. And if I stay with you at all after everything I've learned. Theodore turned to me. Wilbur, please. I know what I did was terrible. But can't you leave us just a little? 10,000, 5? Just for the tickets home? Not a dime, I said firmly. You stole everything from me. I'm taking everything from you. Fair enough, isn't it? It's done, Vivian said, putting the phone away. $170,000 have been transferred to the specified details. The remaining $17,000 we withdrew in cash. Most of it's already spent, but there's about $5,000 left. She took an envelope out of her purse and put it on the table. Here's $4,800. That's all that's left. I nodded, taking the envelope. The necklace you bought for $3,000? It's in the hotel safe, she said. The key is in my bag. That leaves $12,200 left to pay back, I calculated. How are you going to do it? Vivian took the large diamond engagement ring off her finger without thinking. It's worth about $15,000. Ted gave it to me for our 5th anniversary. He said he got a big bonus at work. She glanced bitterly at her husband. I guess now I know where the money really came from. Theodore averted his eyes. Vivian, don't... Shut up, Ted. She put the ring on the table next to the envelope. I don't want to wear it anymore. I took the ring and weighed it in the palm of my hand. I think that's enough. Consider your debt paid. What now? Vivian asked. Will you keep your end of the bargain? Will you let us go? I gave her a long look. Yes, you're free to go. But like I said, no passports and no money. You'll have to get to the American embassy on your own. Explain how you lost your papers. Prove your citizenship. That's going to take time. Days. Maybe weeks. So you're really serious about, renouncing your parentage? Her voice trembled. You don't want to see me again? Ever? You made that choice, Vivian. I stood up. When you decided that money was more important than our relationship. When you let your husband come between us. When you sent that text message. But you said you never stopped loving me. She stood up too. Can't you just cut me out of your life? Love and trust are different things. I looked into her eyes. I've loved you all your life, Vivian, but I don't trust you anymore. And I don't want a relationship without trust. I can change, her voice was pleading. I can prove to you that I'm trustworthy. Just give me a chance. I shook my head. It's too late. Some bridges can't be rebuilt once they've been burned. At that moment, Theodore, who had been watching our conversation in silence, suddenly laughed, a bitter, desperate laugh. What a touching scene, he stood up, swaying. The daughter begs her father's forgiveness. The father is adamant. It's like a cheap melodrama. We both turn to him. You know what the funny thing is, Wilbur? He continued, ignoring Vivian's warning look. You've always been a monster, a cold, calculating monster. I didn't make up stories about you. I was just voicing what I saw. You never really loved your daughter. You used her like everyone else in your life. Ted, shut up, Vivian hissed. But he wouldn't listen. And now you're proving me right. He pointed a trembling finger at me. Look at you. You kidnapped your own daughter, threatened her. You used your gangster buddies to intimidate us. What kind of loving father does that? I listened to his rant without interrupting. Yes, I lied to Vivian about the money, Theodore continued. Yes, I cheated on her. I'm no saint. But I've never pretended to be a good man, unlike you. You wear a mask of decency, but underneath it is a monster. And now Vivian sees it. Now she knows who you really are. He turned to Vivian. Open your eyes. He's always been like this. Always going to put himself and his money before you. He's the one who destroyed your family, not me. Vivian looked at her husband for a long time, then said quietly, You know, Ted, I think you're right now. Dad has really shown his true colors. But you know what the worst part is? She turned to me. I see my own reflection in that face. The same coldness, the same calculating, the same ability to cut people out of your life when you don't need them anymore. I inherited that from you, Dad. And now I understand why we could never really bond. We're too much alike. Her words hurt me more than I'd expected. But I didn't mean it. Maybe you're right. All the more reason for us to stay away from each other. I agree, she nodded. You got your money. Now hold up your end of the bargain. Let us go. I pressed a button on the phone, summoning Jorge. We're done. Our guests are ready to leave. Jorge entered the room accompanied by Miguel and Antonio. Everything is settled? Yes, I nodded. They return the money and leave. No passports, no phones, no money. What about their things at the hotel? Jorge asked. Have my men take them, I shrugged. Sell what they can sell. The rest will be thrown away. Vivian took a thin gold chain with a heart pendant off her neck. It's my mom's. It's the only thing I have left of her. Please. I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. You can keep it. Thank you. She put the chain back on. Goodbye, Daddy. I hope you find peace. Goodbye, Vivian. I turned away, not wanting to show emotion. We won't see each other again. Miguel and Antonio led them out of the room. Jorge stayed with me. Are you sure you want to let them go? They could cause trouble. What kind of trouble? I shrugged. Will they report to the police that they were kidnapped by Mexican bandits after stealing money from their sick father? Not likely. Besides, we have no proof of their involvement in the theft. Technically, Vivian had access to the accounts. But kidnapping is a felony. Right. Jorge nodded. When are you flying back? Tonight, if possible. I felt the fatigue weighing down on me. I want to get home soon. I'll make arrangements for the ticket. Jorge clapped me on the shoulder. It's over, my friend. You got your money back. You can sleep easy. Yes, I smiled weakly. Thank you for your help, Jorge. I owe you one. Consider us even, he smiled back. Those old debts were finally paid. That evening, I flew back to the States. I looked out the window at the Mexican coast and thought about what I'd left behind, not just Vivian and Theodore, but a part of myself. The part that still hoped for the restoration of family, for the warmth of kinship. Gwyneth met me at the Cleveland airport. She didn't ask any questions, just hugged me and took me home. Is everything okay? She asked when we were halfway to Kirtland. Yes, I nodded. The money's back. Vivian and Theodore are no longer a problem. Are you okay with that? She looked at me carefully. With your daughter being... I don't have a daughter anymore, I interrupted her, looking out the window at the fields floating by. We'd both decided that. Gwyneth was silent for a moment, then said quietly, I'm sorry, Will. I know how much you loved her. It's okay, I shrugged. It was better for both of us. At home, the first thing I did was check my bank account. The money was indeed back, all $187,000. I was relieved, but not happy. It was as if I'd closed a wound that had been there for a long time, but there was a scar that would remain a reminder of it for the rest of my life. I spent the next few weeks getting my affairs in order. I paid the hospital bills, bought back Eleanor's pawned items that I'd had to give away when I ran out of money, met with a realtor about selling the house. I decided to move somewhere no one knew me. Maybe Florida or Arizona, where it's warm and there are lots of old people like me. I didn't follow the news from Mexico, didn't try to find out how Vivian and Theodore got out of the country. That was no longer my concern. 3 months passed. I sold the house and bought a small cottage in a suburb of Tucson, Arizona. Gwyneth helped me with the move, and we started seeing each other more often. Nothing romantic, just the friendship of two lonely people with only memories. One day, I got a letter. No return address, but the postmark was from Kirtland. Inside was a short note written in Vivian's familiar handwriting. I divorced Theodore. He tried to sue for half of our property, but I hired a good lawyer. It turned out that Ted had lost over $50,000 at the casino during the years of marriage, which I didn't know about. He also had a secret account into which he transferred money from our joint account. I sold the house and moved to Portland. I got a new job. I'm starting from scratch. Don't try to find me. Don't text me. Don't call me. You wanted to cut all ties. I respect that. That's the last you'll hear from me. Just know one thing. You were right. Theodore manipulated me. But you're not without sin. You used and manipulated me, Mom, everyone around you. Just in your own way, more subtle. I don't want to be a pawn in someone else's game anymore. Not yours or anyone else's. I'm starting a new life. No toxic relationships, no manipulation, no lies. Goodbye, Wilbur. I hope you find the peace you've been looking for so long. She didn't even sign it. I sat in the chair on the veranda for a long time, rereading the letter over and over. Then I crumpled it up and threw it in the trash. Vivian had made her choice. I had made mine. Now we would each live our own lives, without regard for the past. That evening, Gwyneth called. She invited me to dinner. Nothing fancy, just to sit and talk, reminisce about old times. I said yes. Life went on, and we had to move on. That night, I dreamed of Eleanor. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, looking at me with a sad smile. "You can still make things right, Will," she said. "As long as you're alive, it's not too late." I woke with the dawn, with a feeling of heaviness in my chest. But not from a heart attack, from the realization that some mistakes can't be undone. Some bridges, once burned, remain ashes forever. I went out on the veranda with a cup of coffee and took a long look at the rising sun coloring the desert in golden tones. A new day, a new life. No daughter, no family, no past. Just me, my memories, and the determination to live my remaining years with dignity. Maybe Vivian was right. Maybe I really am a monster. Maybe I was manipulating everyone around me without even realizing it. But it didn't matter now. My family was in the past. There was only emptiness ahead, and the freedom to start over. I finished my coffee and went back inside. It was time to prepare for a new day in my new life. A life without toxic relationships, without betrayal, without pain. The life of a lonely old man with nothing more to lose.